have given time but are sort of just trying to campaign against what's been done. So some of these local activists in your communities who've been going, you know, we don't think this is right, I want to campaign a bit against this, would they find that that didn't get any points, so therefore, crikey, I best stop being active, I best stop challenging, and I best go and do something like being a school governor and do something very nice. Yeah? We could actually kill big society by changing volunteering in that way, in my mind. And I think it's a dangerous route. I don't know whether I managed to articulate that properly, but it's sort of starting to trouble me more and more. Because the Metropolitan Police's response to big society, I don't know if you've seen this, is if you want to be a police officer in the Met, you've got to do 18 months voluntary as a special before you can get in. I don't call it voluntary if I have to do it. Yeah, it's not voluntary if I have to do it. And actually, if I get money off my council tax bill for volunteering, I think I've just been paid. I would have said, if there's a financial reward that you're linking to my volunteerism, I think I've just been paid. Actually, I want to know why you're not paying me the minimum wage. Really? Sorry. There's a positive somewhere, I tell you. I had mentioned, I did want to talk about contradictions. I talked a bit about them in commissioning processes. I'll just tell you one of my favourites, which is one of Lord Way's, which he does in one speech. Yeah? He says that the voluntary and community sector has been too dependent on public sector funding. Yeah? We've taken too much public sector funding. That's why we don't speak out like I'm doing now. You see, I've got no public sector funding left, so I can speak out. It was frightening how many colleagues phoned me to say, we'd like to sign the Government Office North West petition you started about saving some form of government in the regions. They phoned me up and said, we'd like to sign it, but our bosses have said we mustn't because we don't want to rock the boat with government. Yeah? And I think the day that the voluntary sector stops speaking out and doing things because they might rock boat is a sad day. And that might be because we've become too dependent on state funding. But Lord Way says, you're too dependent on public sector money. 5 minutes later in his text, he says, the voluntary community sector should be delivering more public services. That's quite good, because I'm not quite sure I'll become independent of that funding, have less state funding, yet deliver more of the services. It's a contradiction. It can't happen like that. And I've talked about the procurement and commissioning. Absolute contradiction to have huge contracts and think that community groups are going to be able to be active and delivering. It won't work like that. It can't do. But what we have to do is find the solutions in all of this. We have to find ways of working together. Voluntary Sector North West started a campaign with our regional colleagues in the sector and others pre-election, but it wasn't just about the election. And it's called Listen, Value, Invest. And what we were saying was some very simple messages. We want our public sector partners to listen to the voluntary sector. When I say voluntary sector, I mean it in its broadest sense, voluntary and community sector. We're making decisions. We can contribute to them decisions. We can use our intelligence. We can help shape services, not just deliver them. We're not just about delivery, we can help shape services. We want you to value the sector, and it was interesting because I heard Kevin talk about valuing the sector. We gave some money over to show that we valued the sector's contribution. We valued communities' involvement. Show that you value by involving them properly. I wonder whether we can talk. There's lots of talk about participatory budgeting. Can we talk about participatory cutting? Can we start to work out how we involve local people, local organisations in the cuts? In my offices in Manchester yesterday downstairs, Manchester PCT was talking to their voluntary sector contractors, and they were saying, we've made the decision we won't cut you this year, but we need to let you know, here's our financial position, we need to have this dialogue with you. And that's really positive. Not to just, you don't get a letter that says you've got a 20% cut. You have a sit down together and we start to work out some of the answers in there. Can we move to some mode of participatory cutting? And invest. The invest bit of that was, for me, around changing language. Far too often the language is negative of funding and grants and the way that Lord Way's told it, we mustn't take the handouts from the state anymore. Real negative. Why can't we see money that's placed with the voluntary sector as an investment in communities, an investment in the voluntary sector, investment in people? If the car plant down the road is shutting down and the government piles millions in to save the jobs, you will see the minister stand up and say that was an investment in the area to keep them jobs alive. So why do they talk so negatively about grants and money that we put into communities that fulfil that triangle that Claire's were talking about, that help create that balanced economy? Why is that the case? So we want to change some of that language to investment. And it's not just about money, it can be about time, effort and energy of officers as well, and staff and other things, how you use other resources, how we do that investment. And so, hopefully, if I can make the technology work in 3 seconds. Here we go. This is the bit I look at you, isn't it, and go, I failed. Escape, that was a key. Not managed to revive.
We're not an expensive project to run, and I think we definitely give value for money. We see a lot of people come through the door, and we couldn't work without our volunteers.
Everybody benefits in different places, in different ways. Some come here because they've been stranded in places where they've been dispersed without any friends. Some are destitute without anything going on, and they come here to have hot meals, tea, coffee, and all those things require money to be put in place.
We were approached a couple of years ago by a psychotherapy service who said, we know, research shows that asylum seekers and refugees experience high levels of stress and anxiety. Why aren't they approaching our service? What are your thoughts? Our thoughts, Susan, my Dr. colleague and myself, were, well, there's a raft of reasons, from taboo around mental health, to not understanding what is mental health, but there's also really practical stuff, like if I get an appointment for counselling, who watches my kids, or I don't have any money, I'm on vouchers or I'm on no support, how do I get to the project? I'm homeless, so I don't have an address for you to send me an appointment letter. So we asked the psychotherapy service whether they would have a go pilot coming out and delivering one-to-one therapeutic sessions to people who had expressed their worries to us. And we started a pilot probably more than 2 years ago, and it works very well. The excitement, you can have a nice office in a specialist centre, but if your client can't get there because they haven't got a bus there, or there's nobody to watch the children, pointless.
Please do listen, value and invest.
And we've got on our Listen, Value, Invest website, those are just my staff going out and talking to some groups, and the point of showing you that one actually was that wasn't about service delivery. That was about when a community group, voluntary group, worked with the PCT, worked with local healthcare providers to make sure the services were more effective and more efficient. They were able to advise on, here's how you reach this client group and we can provide you access to them. They didn't say, we can take over that service and run it better than you, because that wasn't the case there. So there are lots of ways you can do that. Now, I was going to try and move into discussions at tables about this and value invest, but I think we've managed to get to lunchtime, haven't we? So I think that doing any of that would be difficult. But if I could just maybe make one ask of you, is to go and have a look at that listen, value, invest, and then think back to where you're doing your job, whether that's in a housing association, local authority, wherever you're from, and think, actually, what do we do that shows that we listen, value, invest? Because I think that that might give us some of the answers towards creating maybe a better society, if I can avoid the use of the phrase big society. Yeah? Because I think there is definitely something. If the dialogue was if I'd have been here a year ago, I was saying if we do the things we've always done, we'll get what we've always got. And if this is an agenda about change, about thinking about how we can do things differently together to make improvements in our communities, then I'll stick my hand in the air, as will most voluntary and community sector organisations, and say, come on then, let's play and let's get on with it. Yeah? The trouble is, it's bound up in the cuts, political rhetoric, and a not too realistic assumption about the capacity of the voluntary community sector. But I'm happy to take questions from the floor.
Any questions at all? Oh, we'll just bring the microphone over to you. Bear with us. Just make sure that everybody can hear you. It's the
Lady
lady in
here.
the green.
Molly Newman from Helena Partnerships. I see where your cynicism is coming from, because for a number of years at our local hospital, our coffee shop, etc., was run by the WRBS. We've now got a brand new hospital. The WRBS are not there. It's cost a coffee. The service for patients and the people who work in the hospital is obviously a more expensive service, etc. I won't go into the detail. Everybody knows the difference. So I can appreciate the cynicism. I too am of the same view, that whereas volunteers would support services already provided, such as the one I've described, I don't think that a lot of people in our areas, on our estates, are going to get together and run services. Volunteers come because it's something they can give up the time, it's an interest, or it's an extension sometimes of their full-time job. And I don't think that has been appreciated in this big debate. I'm not saying the debate today, I mean the debate about where the big society is going and where it's coming from.
You've just reminded me about one real positive on the horizon, right? There is a private members bill going through. November the 19th is the next reading, and it is about social enterprise, but more importantly, social value. And that private members bill at the moment says that every public sector commissioning process should take into account and include a social value clause. And if that happens, that could make a real difference, not just to how the voluntary community sector can compete for these things, but also actually it might change the approach of some private sector organisations if they have to express not just how they compete on cost, but what is the contribution. So, you know, your Costa Coffee example, the WRVS might have been able to say, we will also have 30 volunteers who will be gaining X, Y and Z skills from this and contributing to the community. They will be able to show an extension of the value they would in delivering that service. The bill has been presented by a Conservative MP and seems to have cross-party support, and even speaking to Francis earlier, he said he thinks some of that might get enshrined in the Localism White Paper. So there is a real movement behind that. We're campaigning for people to support that. So in your personal capacity, go back, write to your MP, ring your MP and say, will you be supporting that bill? Because that could see a sea change in the way that commissioning is done, and it could value volunteering in a really good way in terms of seeing that as social value that organisations can bring when delivering contracts.
I suppose it's also about how people within organisations go back and try and influence their own commissioning processes internally, hopefully backed by the billers.
Yeah.
Good, thank you. Any final questions before we've got one more at the back, and then we're going to take turns. So.
I'd like to support the comments that you made around equality and diversity. It is a major concern of mine in the current climate, and also the fact that disability initially was left out of any kind of real written documents, and disabled people had to fight for that. So I think I'd just like to sort of support what you said around equality and diversity and the role that the voluntary community sector plays in that. So.
Thank you. I do really worry. I took part in a round table with a number of academics, a number of voluntary people, voluntary organisations last Tuesday, and actually the overarching sort of finding of our day spent together was, you know, actually we do believe inequality is an acceptable outcome in the big society agenda. There will be winners and losers. I fear, you know, the right to buy, the right to plan, that little, you know, part of the things that strikes me is who is going to build the next Gypsy and Traveller